Archiver, The Real Queen Bey from KCK, is made possible by a grant from Humanities Kansas. We start this episode with the Dill Pickle Rag, the second largest selling ragtime song ever. Not surprisingly, Scott Joplin's Maple Leaf Rag is number one. I'm playing Dill Pickle for you on a 1915 Fuhr and Stemmer player piano. How fun is that? The kind that uses a pneumatic system to operate the keys and pedals based on holes punched in a paper roll. The song was written by Charles Johnson, born in Kansas City, Kansas in 1876, and after Scott Joplin, probably the most successful ragtime composer in history. Dill Pickle Rag sold 1 million copies. Charles Johnson and his best friend from Kansas City, Kansas High School, Charles Daniels, were white and became wealthy composing and playing ragtime. So what does all of this have to do with Queen Bey, a jazz, blues, and Broadway singer? Turns out, a lot.
Kansas City, Kansas is often overlooked. The music of Kansas City, Kansas is often overlooked. And it produced so many great musicians.
Queen Bey came out of a public education system in KCK rooted in music and propelled by some of the greatest musicians in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. And she stood on the shoulders of a long line of musical stars. The podcast is Archiver, The Real Queen Bey from KCK, Episode 3, From Ragtime to 18th and Vine. Me, I'm your host, Sam Zeff.
You went to Sumner High School.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about Sumner. Sumner is a very famous school in Kansas City. So talk about Sumner High School.
That's Archiver producer and Oscar-winning filmmaker Kevin Wilmot in the last interview Queen Bey gave before she died in May 2024.
I look back at Sumner now and my heart's broken because it doesn't have the luster that it had when I was growing up. And I don't hardly see any African American. That is what my problem is. I mean, this is all we had in the hood was our school, and this is how my career got started, singing in the music class. And it's like it never was.
And so you had some famous friends that came out of that school with you.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit.
Nathan Davis, Carmel Jones.
Saxophonist Nathan Davis and trumpeter Carmel Jones are jazz legends, although like many jazz greats, much bigger stars in Europe. But the history of great music in KCK starts way before Queen and her Sumner classmates. So, when you want to know about that, there's only one person to talk to.
My name is Curtis Smith. I have a PhD in urban leadership and policy studies in higher education here from UMKC, and a master's degree in history of science, minoring in Renaissance and medieval history at KU. So that's how I come into the history side of it. Grew up in Kansas City, loved Kansas City jazz and music through the years.
As with much of Kansas history, this is all wrapped up in slavery and, says Smith, starts when white settlers forced the Wyandot Nation off their upper Midwest land in the 1840s.
That the Wyandot tribe that settled there was against slavery, and they recruited the New England Immigrant Aid Society to bring white people in to make it a free state. And they're coming in at Quindaro through an underground railroad. Slaves are actually escaping in Wyandot City. So African Americans fled from the South to Kansas only. Huge immigration. They bypassed Kansas City, Missouri, and wanted to settle in Kansas, and many of them settled in 2 immigration waves after the Civil War. And they bring this blues, early blues, it wasn't even called blues yet, according to some, and what becomes ragtime, pre-ragtime music, minstrelsy, all of these different things from Mississippi to Kansas, and most of them settle in KCK. And there was a group of intellectuals there among them that started recruiting the best educators they could from the East. And they had their own community that, according to Booker T. Washington, was the most sophisticated African-American urban community in the United States in KCK between 1880 and 1910.
This is from Smith's book, Kansas City, Kansas, Cultural Rhythms in Ragtime and Jazz. KCK was a role model for African Americans, he wrote, with many successful businesses, churches, hospitals, scholars, home ownership, and especially secondary and post-secondary schools in the last decade of the 19th and early 20th centuries. No school, Smith says, was more important than Western University, the first historically black college west of the Mississippi. It was established in the then thriving black town of Quindaro in Wyandotte County and mostly funded by the AME Church.
They had the premier teachers in the United States in music for choral, gospel, classical training, sight reading, crafting, music composition, music theory, very advanced, very important school, first or second best, depending on who you read, back and forth during the early 1900s, ahead of the jazz era. And I think it had a huge effect.
Choral, gospel, classical, and this. The all-black 23rd Army Regimental Band was led by George Washington Jackson of the Western faculty. The 23rd served in the Spanish-American War, and Smith writes, they influenced Cuban musicians with their syncopated rhythms.
Does Western University have an effect on the music education that people get in the Kansas City, Kansas school district?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, it's tied in with Sumner High School beginning in 1904. And then you have to do the Northeast Junior High by 1923. I do the history of Northeast Junior High's music contributions. They just recruited great teachers to those schools, and that's where the effect comes in. And many times they end up getting picked up in Kansas City, Missouri school districts because they were paying more after 1920. Lincoln High School basically stole away Major Ann Clark Smith, and that is the jazz history coming to Kansas City, Missouri, just right there. He's the keystone to the switch from KCK to KCMO.
Western University would fall on hard times during the Depression and eventually close in 1943 when the Kansas legislature stopped providing money. Today, there are no buildings left, just a memorial in an out-of-the-way corner of KCK.
Say, have you seen that karaoke? Not a foxtrot or a polka. Got a little bit of new rhythm, a blue rhythm, a song.
But not before, Smith says, producing three of the most influential African-American female singers ever, Eva Jessye, Nora Holt, and Etta Moten Barnett. This is Barnett singing the karaoke from Flying Down to Rio, the 1933 musical and the first big screen pairing of Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers.
I say you're gonna dream of that new karaoke when music and lights are gone and you're saying goodbye.
So Queen Bey stands on the shoulders of, I'm sure she would agree, those three women out of Western. All the women do after that, whether they're on Broadway, movies, TV, singing careers, they all stand on those three women from Western. So those three Eva Jessye starts it, and she brings them into Broadway, and they all end up in great careers, filtered by her giving. She was the first one to make it in Broadway, Eva Jessye, and she brings these women in, and they start out and make great careers, and they were all from Western.
Queen Bey followed in that KCK tradition and also starred on Broadway. But man, did she have some acting chops.
And whatever I wrote, she understood. And I never had to tell her, I don't think I ever had to tell her one time how to do a line. But she just always knew. And that's a lived life.
That's on our next episode of Archiver, The Real Queen Bee from KCK. We started this episode with the Dill Pickle Rag, so I want to play you out with my favorite version. This is a 1908 78 RPM recording, just 2 years after it was written by KCK's Charles Johnson. It's on the RCA Victor label, and that is a fellow named Chris Chapman on the xylophone. It comes from the Library of Congress National Jukebox Collection of more than 10,000 RCA Victor recordings between 1901 and 1925. Archiver is produced by Scott Richardson and Kevin Wilmot in the studios of KCUR 89.3 in Kansas City and is made possible with a grant from Humanities Kansas. Archiver is a production of Do Good Productions, where Gene Johnson is executive producer. My thanks to Curtis Smith for his insights. I'm Sam Zeff, and I'll see you on the next Archiver.